I had no idea that they were issuing awards and that like we'd be one of them. And to be honest, I thought at like initial glance the email was spam when they sent it to us and it like announced it because they were like, we're going to pay for your travel out here and we'd love for you to join us. And it was like a really cool moment.
Welcome back to another episode of Click to Buy. Today I'm joined by a very special guest. Well, this June, Shopify announced their first ever Build Awards in their Editions Dev event. So I am super excited to announce the winner of the Most Creative Storefront Award, Jordan Sowers, the co-founder of Postfamiliar, an experimental winery. When he's not busy working at Postfamiliar, he designs various other e-com sites on Shopify, like currentcollection.com and princecoffee.com. He has an equal love for art direction, design, and web development. Jordan has helped launch product ecosystems for PGA Tour and Gatorade when he was at Work & Co. He also used to work at Instrument, where he collaborated with big, well-known brands like Nike, Sonos, and Google. I think you've maybe heard of a few of those. So with all of this extensive experience in the e-com industry, I'm super excited to hear his advice today and hear about the story of winning his Shopify Build Award. Jordan, thank you so much for being my guest here on Click to Buy. Welcome to the podcast.
Yes, thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
Well, first of all, congratulations on winning the Most Creative Storefront Award. So when we were chatting before this podcast, you actually told me that this award came as a surprise. So I'm curious, like, how did you learn that this happened, and what does this recognition mean for you and your team?
Yeah, it was actually a total surprise for Brent, who's my business partner at
Hmm.
Postfamiliar. Like, I, as a designer developer, knew that the conference was coming up. I like follow Shopify editions and actually look forward to the edition release I feel like it's twice a year or once a year.
Yeah, twice a
Um,
year.
and yeah, I get some features. I just have my fingers crossed every time I look at that page. I'm like, let's hope to see that something's getting released. But I had no idea that they were issuing awards and that like we'd be one of them. And to be honest, I thought at like initial glance the email was spam when they sent it to us and it like announced it because they were like, we're going to pay for your travel out here and we'd love for you to join us. And it was like a really cool moment. But I think the opposite side of that is like I don't necessarily hunt for awards, and I think that like it's not necessarily a reason that people hire you. It's like your work, and so I have this
Hmm.
like weird relationship with awards. But I think to kind of answer your question too, like the
Hmm.
recognition in this, I'm not really like I see myself as a designer and developer, but my day job is like nothing but design. So development has
Yeah.
happened like all on the side, and uh, it's just really cool to get like recognized for something that you feel like an imposter to. And I don't know, there's something like that I like the more I've sat with it, the more I've like, this is actually pretty cool.
Absolutely. Well, I can tell already just from chatting with you that you're pretty humble. But maybe if we can dive into thinking from an outside perspective, like if you were looking at your storefront that you've designed and built, what do you think kind of sets it apart from the competition or other stores that are out there?
Yeah, you know what's funny is I've been curious about this because I wanted to know what the like who else was kind of in the mix of consideration,
Hmm.
and I don't really have an honest answer. But when I look at our site with fresh eyes, sometimes like I'll take a break and then I'll come back and like try to like look at it in the perspective of like new eyes. And I think one of the things that we talked really early on before like getting into like the site design was just around this idea of like experimentation and making post familiar wine centered around
Mm.
taking risks. Because Brent, my partner, and I have like full-time jobs, and so we do this on the side and we like love it, but it could just like fall apart tomorrow and be our lives would be the same. And so just there's that risk taking, I think actually opened up a lot of like fun avenues for us. And I've always wanted the initial response to, our website, our social, or even like wine release parties that we host. I just wanted people to like look around and be like, this is a winery. I wanted it to feel so different. So anyways, I think that Delta, at least in, the wine category, might have helped it stand out a little bit, just because I hope that it doesn't really connect with what you traditionally experience like a wine company to like look and feel like. But yeah, I don't know. Like it's kind of a hard question to answer without like looking at the other sites, but it's still pretty cool.
Absolutely. And I think like we'll definitely link in the show notes, of course, your store so people who are listening in can check it out. But if you're even on the homepage, like things are moving around, it just has a really cool vibe. And before I like dive into the design, because I have a ton of questions about that, I'd first love to know like what's the story behind Postfamiliar and how did you come up with the idea? Because clearly you've put a lot of thought into the brand, and I'm sure that's what's translated into this really experiential vibe when you're visiting it online, or I guess now also hearing that you have these cool in-person events as well.
Yeah, like I think most companies that seem to be sprouting up these days, it was like the pandemic was the ultimate catalyst for something like this to happen, because
Mhm.
we were just sitting at home a lot. But prior to that, actually, like going way back, I grew up in the Willamette Valley here in Oregon, which is like prized for its wine, and now it's just becoming like a total like tourist destination, which feels weird to like visit your hometown and be like not recognize how it's transitions. But I think I always felt scared of wine. I think there's something about it that feels really kind of exclusive and serious, and you had to like play a role when you were drinking wine in front of others at like restaurants, and um, you just felt kind of even nervous to order wine. And I just had distaste for that. I think over the years I had really amazing experiences, and just thought like that, well, why is it that everyone kind of like follows the same like cachet and cliches around drinking wine, especially like in the Willamette Valley. And it really hit a moment for me in a grocery store when like all of our like local bottles looked like they were
Yeah.
coming from Europe, and none of them, they were all like branded to just not really help a consumer that was generally curious about the category. And so I really got hooked on that idea as a designer. I mean, we're thinking about users and like empathy all the time, and I was like, oh, this is something that like no one's really like doing that well. And the natural wine scene, I'd say, is like so much better at like recognizing and connecting with like a younger, like curious audience, while still playing to those who really care and want to nerd out about wine. But anyways, to move on a little bit, I think I got hooked on this idea around tasting notes, like similar to like coffee. Like you see the tasting notes on the packaging, and you, as a consumer, like form a perspective of like what type of coffees you like, if you want it really bright and fruity or dark and chocolatey. And I thought there was something there. And so during the pandemic, a good friend introduced me to a sommelier named Brent Braun. He works at a restaurant here in town called OK Omens. And we just connected instantly about this idea of like starting a winery. We don't own like a vineyard. We have no way of like producing wine, but he came up with the idea around doing collaborations with different winemakers. Like he's so well connected. He's been like nominated multiple times for James Beard Awards. Like I didn't know this like his like gravitas, but in meeting him, we just like I said, we connected, and just like it spiraled into this really cool idea. And meanwhile, I had to learn that Brent had been writing these like really fun, irreverent tasting notes on his wine menus at his restaurant. And that has now become like, one of the main focal points of like our wine labels, is just something to really draw you into like what the wine tastes like. And so the rest of the journey has been really incredible. Like he's been my mentor in like wines. I really like to play dumb to the wine world, just because I like want to learn like all there is to know. And we've had 5 releases. All of them have sold out. And like I mentioned a little bit about our release parties, but that has been like, the real life experience outside of like the internet and like releasing wines online. You see the people that come and enjoy these releases, and it's grown pretty substantially over those years. And it's like a really like weird emotional moment where you like actually see physical people in a space, connect with your brand, which I played music a long time ago as like a teenager, early in my 20s, and it feels like kind of doing like a show with a band in a way. It's super fun, but yeah, it's been an incredible journey.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing. And what a cool story. I can already kind of see from what you're saying how that making wine more accessible and kind of bringing it to maybe a consumer that may have felt the same way that you did, like it was this kind of elephant in the room of I want to try this, but I don't know where to start or I don't know what to pick. Like these are all questions that definitely people have. And I love how you kind of thought about that and you found a founder who also co-founder who also had this kind of different approach to wine and kind of came together to build your brand. I think that is super cool. I'd love to hear even more about like, so you have Postfamiliar now and you're thinking about building an online storefront to sell this wine brand that you've created. How did you go about creating that initial design or bringing that kind of idea that you had into the storefront in Shopify?
Yeah, it's evolved so much over the years, and I've like
Hmm.
rebuilt it multiple times to a fault of just like really asking questions around like what we're doing and like wanting to like just continually like tweak it. But the site started off as we actually like closed it entirely, and there's like a that offline mode you can do where you have to like enter a password. We actually turned that into a email capture. We didn't have anything ready, but we were starting to get press around the initial announcement. Like I said, Brent was really connected, and so we got like an article on Eater, and like we're able to like drive traffic to our Shopify site and start to like
Hmm.
capture general interest. And then like over the years, we've slowly like enabled like wine club memberships. And I think taking a step back, this site's purpose has always been to like, I mean now especially, it's been to like support the wine club, but also like offer pathways for new visitors to like purchase if they're curious like what we're up to and want to try like our latest release and drop. And I think most importantly, I wanted it to feel like, unlike any other wine site out there. I've kind of like alluded to that earlier, but the thing that I always had felt with the design of the site that I wanted was like, there's so many like tried and true design approaches out there. And I always, like I said earlier, just like taking risks, like there's a world we live in now with just all of these sites are getting launched all the time. And there's similarities that you can connect between them. And I really enjoy challenging that. Like, why is it that everyone does this one thing that certain way? And I think where the site is at now is like just been like years of like trying to do unconventional design approaches while still like adhering to like best practices within e-commerce. I mean, there's still like a wide world to like explore on top of like, your traditional like click path.
Absolutely. We actually had a previous guest on the podcast, Linda Bustos, who is founder of Ecom Ideas. So she commonly shares different cool e-commerce storefront ideas. And one thing that you said that really stuck out with me is in our episode together, she said, people will figure out your spicy store design if they care enough and if they're like intrigued and interested enough. And it sounds like you're really on this forefront of this kind of new design wave in creating interesting, interactive experiences that maybe aren't like what consumers typically expect. But today, a lot of people enjoy that challenge of like figuring it out if they're intrigued and engaged and interested enough. So I think it's really cool to hear how you've kind of brought that vision into reality.
It's a cool point too, because I think that like you only have a few seconds. Like there's so many like
Hmm.
sites and brands and companies out there that I really enjoy trying to make something compelling within like 1 to 3 seconds. And like on our site right now, I
Yeah.
don't know WebGL, but I had a friend help me out with that like crazy like morphing type animation.
Hmm.
But there's a reason why that's there, and it's because like you've come here from somewhere, and we're wanting to give you like a greeting and welcome you and let you know that this is like going to try to do something different.
Absolutely. That's definitely kind of like my first thought when I was first kind of clicking through your site as well. I was instantly like, whoa, like what is this place? But I think it's a great when you can get that initial exciting reaction from customers. So of course your store not only looks great, but as like a Shopify store owner, I'm sure you also want to make sure that it does perform great as well, so that you have that seamless shopping experience for your customer. I'm curious if you have any tips or things that you've done that you've seen has worked really well to kind of meet the needs of your online shoppers.
Yeah, it's taken some time to get it right. I think there's like
Mhm.
always assumptions that we make, and then we kind of uh, test them in releases. So we release wines twice a year, and I think a lot of it is centered around like trying to figure out how to make that offering and like value proposition around like the wine club more interesting. And to
Mhm.
do that, I think that that's where we've seen like the most successes and failures. I think that Shopify has an amazing framework to like help you establish like the right, category detail pages to product detail pages with like all the right like functionality just like effectively built in. That what we like to like push on is like the things that sit on top of that. And like we have like really long form stories around our wines on our product detail pages, like our wine pages. They're like way too long, but we see great traffic to them and we see time spent on them that like I think reinforces. Brent does all the writing for them, and I think it
Mhm.
helps us like realize like not everything needs to feel so transactional. And there's times where a lot of the e-commerce best practices feel just so disingenuous on like, oh, I can clearly tell that
Mhm.
you're just trying to convert me versus like trying to like again like I think it goes back to just us taking risks a little bit and like easing off the gas of like selling the wine and like pushing sales. Yeah, I think that it's like opened up a lot for us to kind of like reevaluate how we've like designed some of the pages, not like trying to go all in on conversion. But that said, I think like there's something around maybe if there's like any value for anyone else, there is something around to like a limited offering that has helped like push um, like sales on the site. Like the wines will eventually sell out, and once they sell out, that will never be available again. It's like a one time collaboration, and
Mhm.
so I think there's already like momentum in something like that where effectively the rest of the experience is trying to just play into the ephemerality of the thing, but also like those long form pages are almost like the long lasting artifact. Like we never take down a product after it's sold out; it like stays on there. Um, but yeah, I think we're like always like wanting it to perform better, and like I said,
Mhm.
I continuously tweak it. It's like I can't help it because it's ours. Like I'm so used to my time. Most of my time is working with a client partner, delivering an
Mhm.
experience, giving them the tools to like run with it, and it feels like a little sad to see it go and you're no longer working on it. And in the case of this, when you like own something, it's almost like a weird curse where you like want to continuously improve it, but also like balance your time to like other.
I absolutely understand that. I've spoken to a lot of different people who work at like agency versus like you who now has your own brand, but of course you have other stuff that you also work on the side. Really cool to hear how you've kind of continuously tweaked to see what works. And kind of bringing it back to what I guess a lot of brands have to think about first, like their customer. So you mentioned that the online storefront really serves your wine club. Is a lot of the traffic that's coming in on your online site people who have gone to your in-person events, or is it coming in from like social media or like a mix of both? Like, how do you kind of match who's coming in with like what they're going to see when they first appear on your online store?
Yeah, it's a good question. So like I think we see two spikes in the year, and a lot of it is from like our email campaigns. We always kind of like lead up to a
Mm.
release and give some previews of things that are coming. And I think throughout the rest of the year, we see it mainly coming from like our social, probably mostly like I think either diving deeper into like who we are or seeing what wines are still available like in that given season. And then we're also like available in like stores in the States. So like I think there's like our stockist page gets like a lot of traffic. The thing too is funny about all of this is like shipping wine and selling wine online is not fun. Like the laws around it like is the worst business to like enjoy any bit of freedom in. And I think that there's a part of the releases that we have there twice a year that we just like have these like huge ramp ups to like, you know, shipping out wines. Cause there's another thing around like wine shipping outside of laws that is this like thing around seasonality. Like if it gets too cold or too hot, you can't ship. So I think a lot of our traffic, like I said, spikes those multiple times a year when it's like really only available. And then it kind of like, it dies down, to be honest. Not in like a way that we're not seeing like growth, but it is definitely like in comparison to like looking at the year in the analytics, it's like just no competition, just like fall and spring are big ones.
Interesting that seasonality plays such a big role. And I'm actually also kind of curious hearing how you've talked about these are some of kind of the maybe difficulties of shipping wine. I had no idea, but it makes a lot of sense when you say these are all the problems that can occur, the things that we have to think about. How do you also communicate maybe what the process is going to be like to assuage maybe some of the concerns of consumers who are waiting on that wine? Like, do you pretty much provide all that info up front so they know what to expect? Do you have an email flow? Or are people just so excited for Postfamiliar wines, like they know what it's like because they're coming back again and again?
You can tell who is following along closely and who isn't by some of the questions that we get. And it's to no fault. Like I mean, we're all scanning as we're reading sites. And I think that wait posts on a flow, or even just like getting out of Shopify and thinking about like somebody's coming in through email or social, how do you like have these like wait posts along the way to always say like, you know, the season is changing and we only are going to be shipping this period of time. Distribution changes a lot of that for sure. But I think when we're handling shipping on our own end, we try to communicate that anywhere it makes sense in the journey. Like we'll do it on the product detail page. When you get to like your cart, I had this like little flashing text that says like whether it's open or delayed shipping, to kind of like help set the expectation. Cause it's nothing like, you know, being really excited about any product you're purchasing and then realizing like you have to wait. And we've like lived that, you know, buying furniture in the pandemic and then realize like, oh my gosh, this is 9 months before I'm getting it.
Yeah.
So I think we've like seen the pain and tried to just be like really like methodical and like where it makes sense, because most of the time no one's reading it. And when you get the order confirmation, we even say it there too, but like all order confirmations we get, we just want to see the email. We don't even need to open it. We just know that the order has been placed. So yeah, it's a delicate one, but I think it's one of the lessons we learned really early on. And it seemed pretty chaotic, just like, you know, two guys coming up with a wine company and working with different wine producers and launching this stuff and then getting all these questions. But now I feel like it's like, you know, like anything, the more you do it, the more like finely tuned it becomes.
Absolutely. I think like a lot of people who listen in are in the e-commerce space, maybe also launching a store or going through it. So obviously everyone has their own unique challenges, but really interesting to hear how you've dealt with the unique challenges that are presented by working with wine distributors or producers all around the US or the world, or I'm not sure actually where you source your wine from. But I actually had a question that kind of popped into my mind. Because I know you have such an experiential like design kind of ideology. How much does like the flavor, the tastings that you do with the wine kind of influence the design when you have like a pop-up or your next whatever sort of launch material that you've created?
We tend to have,
Mm-hmm.
so in the beginning I set myself up perfectly. I wanted to do a different visual center each release and have like a theme. So with each release, Brent does like these long form editorials around the wine, and typically there's
Mm-hmm.
themes that come out of that. Then I then translate into like almost like a mini identity for the
Mm-hmm.
winery. And so I think the tasting notes, while there's definitely an opportunity to like play into those for like art direction for photo shoots and everything, they haven't fully like taken the front seat in that role. It's been more of like through these collaborations with winemakers, what are the themes that have been coming out? And so every year we have almost like I said, like a new identity to certain aspects of the site. And that follows into like newspapers we release, our emails. And I think that shift every year helps it feel fresh to us. And also like,
Yeah.
I think there's something just about like bringing people along for like the journey that we're on. And when we're releasing something to make it feel like really well connected. And that is now like taken more of a role within our wine events where we're like, I've never wanted somebody to come to a wine event and be like, this feels snooty. Like the last one we had was in a warehouse. We had an installation artist. There was projections, and it was like really, it was like light outside, but like really dark inside. And so really like transporting people to a different space that aligns with, whatever that visual center is for that year. And this year just happened to be around a canned wine seltzer that we released. So a lot of the
Mm-hmm.
graphics were playing into the aluminum, like material of the can to kind of like,
Gotcha.
but even before we launched it, like, I don't
Yeah.
know if anyone really connects this stuff, but for us, it's like we get really excited about like kind of teasing out certain aspects of like what we're up to.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for sharing that, especially for others that are maybe curious and coming up with a different strategy. I think that idea of kind of like teasing and building hype and launching can work for wine, but also for lots of different brands out there that want to try different strategies for getting people excited when they do a new drop. And as you said, you pretty much know when you release the wine, it's going to sell them. It's going to sell out. It's not a matter of if, but when. So that's super exciting to hear. And before we wrap up, I would love to hear, we have this segment called our Clickworthy Tip segment. So this is any advice that you have for other maybe Shopify store owners and founders out there like yourself who are just starting to think about the design for their Shopify store. So any phrase or thoughts or motivation even.
The favorite thing about my uh, role as a designer is to just always ask what if questions and to try to come up with something that isn't conventional. And if you're introducing something that's new to any category online, like why not try to make it unique and introduce
Mm-hmm.
something like have something that's like totally a new offering. And so I would just say like always ask what if and like really try to push yourself to do something that feels like unconventional.
I love it. Well, thank you so much for sharing all of your advice and all of your stories today. Anyone who's listening in, remember that this is Jordan from Postfamiliar. So, of course, I know where to find you online because I was able to rope you into doing this podcast with me today. But for anyone who might not know where to find you, where's the best place to find you and all of your many business ideas and ventures like Postfamiliar or other projects you've got going on?
Yeah, I would say my site, jordansowers.com, but I would really
Mm-hmm.
like want to push postfamiliar.com because
Mm-hmm.
it's been our baby for the past 5 years. So we're really excited about it.
Absolutely. Well, that's a wrap on today's episode of Click to Buy. Thank you so much, Jordan, for sharing all of your valuable insights on building a creative Shopify storefront and also giving us a peek behind the curtain on how you build up Postfamiliar wines. Once again, I'm your host, Becca Anderson, here from Instant Page Builder. If you enjoyed today's episode, feel free to leave a review, leave a note, let me know how it went. If you have any questions for Jordan that I can send his way, or any other tips you want us to cover in a future episode for your fellow ecom enthusiasts. And until next time, keep turning those clicks into buys.